Hi folks, and welcome to another episode of Rick Simon Fishing Adventures Birding Edition. Well, we're in mid-November now, and we're seeing a lot of different types of birds come through our feeder and backyard. One of those birds is a red bellied woodpecker, which we'll show in this episode. Along with this, we also got the dark-eyed junco, the snowbirds as they're known as. They came in, and there are also many other birds that came to the ground. A lot of ground birds in this episode. And we wanted to show you not only feeder footage up on this episode, but also what happens on the ground. You see a lot of squirrels going on our feeder, but now we've kind of compensated for that by putting more food on the ground so that the squirrel doesn't want to go on the feeder anymore. And we put food in the feeder that the squirrel doesn't necessarily like. And you'll see that in this episode. However, with that being said, when you take out things like sunflower seeds in the feeder, it affects things like birds like the cardinal. So we had to make some compensations for that, and we did that along this episode that we could keep all the birds happy and have a very pleasant backyard. So hope you enjoy this episode, folks, and we'll talk to you at the end of the show. It's a beautiful eastern bluebird, folks. I have to go wipe out the camera. I think I got some type of some of the sewage is blocking the lens, but I don't want to disturb him. He's just such a nice looking bird. So folks, I think this is a dark-eyed junco, and yeah. So folks, this is a red-bellied woodpecker, not to be confused with the downy woodpecker. As you can tell, he's a lot bigger and he's got a real full red cap. He is here. Generally these birds were in the southeastern United States before. However, they have spread throughout the US. So it was quite cool to see him in here. I actually saw him out of my front yard too. And here you have the Carolina wren, another bird that likes suet and nuts. Given the time of year, I was trying to attract woodpeckers and nut birds. So this Carolina wren showed up and he liked the suet as well. He is a year-round bird in Douglas. However, he seems to come and go a lot. Folks, you've seen blue jay quite often at the feeder and its stance at the feeder. However, the blue jay actually prefers to eat from the ground. It's really a ground bird in terms of its feeding. And you'll notice that here. We decided to put a camera up on the ground so that we could see a lot of these different ground birds that generally aren't on a feeder and show them to you. Here we have the eastern bluebird, folks, which is typically a ground bird. However, in this instance, I was able to entice it to the feeder. And the way that I did this was I saw a bunch of eastern bluebirds flying around and hanging out on the ground. And I went and I grabbed some of these mealworms, these dried mealworms that my wife picked up for me down at Runnings. And I put a bunch of them in the feeder, and this attracted the eastern bluebird. They really do like to eat nuts. Another thing that they like to do is build nests in cavities, like older, more abandoned type of trees that are dead. However, when they can't do this, it's good to put up a bird box for them, and they really like bird boxes, and that's how they reproduce quite a bit in the area. Well, folks, if you've ever seen Alfred Hitchcock's 1963 classic, The Birds with Tippi Hedren, you may see flashbacks in this. You can see all these grackles and blackbirds competing here. Generally what happens in the fall is the grackle and the red winged blackbird, which you'll see here in a minute, they kind of team up to flock together. And they generally head down to like Georgia or somewhere where it's warmer for a few months. Then they come back. But the thing about having these big flocks is it's really helps them with the predators, and they see other predators and they're able to kind of switch the way they fly and confuse predators, and you'll see that. But here they're just competing. The grackle is really taking over this feeder, but this red winged blackbird, he's not about to be thrown out. Check it out. Another reason that you see these birds flocking together is they're very, very similar in terms of what they need in terms of food, rest, and other things. Their predators are generally the same, so they're basically cousins, is what when you talk about the red-winged blackbird and the grackle. The crows can be thrown into that, and maybe sometimes ravens, although ravens aren't really in this area too much, but these birds, they flock together and they believe in safety in numbers. Also, when they're roosting or resting at night, they're able to share intel with each other if a predator is nearby. Folks, we also have our songbirds, which we need to protect in our backyard. This downy woodpecker, black-capped chickadee, and tufted titmouse, they're the key focus of our backyard. They're here year-round, and they deserve to be able to have their homes in a nice way, too. So we kind of watch if any of the other birds kind of get out of sorts, so to speak. We'll take that food and maybe disperse it away from the feeder a little bit so that our little guys can be okay. This is a very common songbird. Again, you're not going to see too many of these on the feeder. They're mostly going to be on the ground. And maybe in the spring, I'll put up a bird box with a camera in it. And maybe we'll get lucky and we'll have a nesting bluebird in there. And that would be cool to see the circle of life. We'll see. These are actually different bluebirds, folks. There was a bunch of them back there and they came at different times. So this isn't all the same bird. They usually go in big groups as well. Pretty hard not to like this bird. I mean, look how beautiful he is. I hope we get a lot more of him in the winter time. He came by a couple of times. He was hard to entice, but when he did come, he certainly gave us good footage. But he didn't come more than once a day. He never came multiple times a day like the downy woodpecker did. He just kind of came in and made his rounds and took off, and that's all we saw of him. As you can see, Ralph showed up and we have Suet in here. So Ralph's kind of looking around and he's a little bit confused. He's like, all right, there isn't any sunflower seeds in here, and those are my favorite. What are they trying to do? Are they trying to pull a fast one on me? I felt kind of bad for Ralph, so I made a few adjustments the next day. And you'll see here as Junior comes in, he kind of feels the same way. He doesn't really see what he wants on the menu. So the next day, we replenished the tray with sunflower seeds, and you could see Ralph's very happy again. I think I found the culprit that's been eating my wife's flowers back there. Beautiful, beautiful doe. Or their fawn. So one thing I'm trying to do is get the squirrel to stay on the ground. I put really, really good food on the ground. I put a camera down here. You can see the squirrel. He's so big he almost looks like a prairie dog. He's not going to get up on the camera. He's way too fat. But I put a lot of food on the ground here so that the squirrels know this is where they should eat at. They shouldn't be on the feeder. And I put stuff on the feeder that the squirrel doesn't necessarily like. You can see the squirrel over here in front of this dark-eyed junco. And here we have another ground bird, our mourning dove. But I just wanted to put this down so you could see there's always activity around the feeder, even if not on the feeder. You're going to see birds on the ground. And you could see the dark-eyed juncos. They're not really that close, but here in a moment you'll see when they got much closer and we got a good camera opportunity with. Here we have a good close-up of our dark-eyed junco, folks. As I mentioned earlier, we call these snowbirds because they come down during the winter from up in Canada. They're really a neat bird, and I'm looking forward to seeing more of them. They do only stay on the ground. I can't get them to come to the feeder, so hopefully we'll get some more shots of them this winter, and it'll be really cool seeing them on the snow. Juncos only like it on the ground, folks. They come in the wintertime and they're called snowbirds. They generally come from Canada, and you see them all over the place on the ground, but they're hard to get because anytime there's a squirrel around, there's a lot of food around, they're not going to be there. They're just going to be picking at seeds and stuff to kind of fall off feeders that aren't on the main track because they don't want to come into contact with little birds and that type of thing. Or larger birds and that type of thing, and squirrels. Well, as soon as I said we couldn't get a dark-eyed junco to come to the feeder, it did. I was getting ready to wrap up this episode, and as I was talking about the dark-eyed junco not coming to the theater, I looked out at the bird feeder, and this guy came, and he was there for a little while. So you get a real good close-up of this bird and how pretty it is. It's actually part of the sparrow family, if you were wondering, and its similarities are very much alike to the sparrow, where it feeds on the ground. So folks, these are not an endangered bird. There's over 630 million of these out there, so that's good news. Well, folks, I hope you enjoyed that episode of Rick Simon Fishing Adventures Birding Edition. We really were happy to get that junco on at the end. You know, those guys are prevalent in the backyard, but they don't like to really go in the mainstream. They like to kind of go off by themselves and hop around a little bit where there's not a lot of traffic from other birds and squirrels. The Red Bellied Woodpecker, I actually saw that guy out on a tree here in the front yard today, so it's really cool to see him here now. We're hoping to get some pileated woodpeckers in the future and other types of woodpecker types of birds. So look forward to that in future episodes. We will be doing more fishing episodes. However, now it is the middle of November. We're probably going to do some fishing around Thanksgiving, and then, you know, do some other fishing in December, and then we'll really start to get back into it in January when we do ice fishing. So hold on for that, folks. It'll be just a few months away. And thanks again for watching this episode of Rick Simon Fishing Adventures Birding Edition, and we'll talk to you in the next one. Have a great day.